and welcome to another episode of Read It with Whiskey. I am your host, Laura Juntunen, and today we are talking with Sagan Morrow. Sagan is a multi-passionate creative and productivity strategist who writes polyamorous romantic comedy novels, including her Polyamorous Passions series. She shares the behind-the-scenes scoop about her writing journey in the Indie Author Weekly podcast, which I am a huge fan of. I have listened to every single episode. So drawing on a decade of experience as a freelance writer, Sagan now helps other multi-passionate creatives and solopreneurs save about 10 plus hours every single week through maximizing productivity. And it's all based on their personality. They take strategic action to finally achieve their dreamy goals without burning out. That's the key. So you can connect with her on Twitter and Instagram. All of her information will be given to you at the end of this episode. Let's get into it. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, an interview podcast highlighting self-published authors. I am your host, Laura Juntunen. The purpose behind this podcast is to help authors grow their audience while also introducing readers to their new favorite authors. Let's get to know the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. All right, it is time for a Laura J. Live update. During the month of April, I have a really big project going on, you guys. I am participating in Camp NaNoWriMo. So NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month, and it's usually the traditional NaNoWriMo is in November, where you take 30 days of November and you write 50,000 words of a new book or project. So they have done spin-offs, which they call Camp NaNoWriMo. Those take place in April and July. And so this is my first time participating in Camp Nano. And so for the month of April, I'm actually writing book 2 of my series. So the Shockwave series, Transient Pulse, is, I guess actually it's already out. You guys, I'm recording this before it's published, but as of this interview or as of this episode, Transient Pulse is out. Oh my God, I'm freaking out right now. This is so cool. I'm talking from the past. So Transient Pulse was published on March 28th, which also was my birthday. I turned 28 on the 28th and had Transient Pulse come out the same day. So much has happened this year already. Oh my goodness. So anyway, so the first book is now out, and that means book 2. I am well into book 2. I'm diving into it. As of this recording, I have not revealed the name of book 2, so I'm not going to tell you now, but keep your eyes and ears out on my Instagram because that's where people will find out. And if you want to find out information even sooner, then you definitely want to head over to my Patreon account, www.patreon.com/Read It With Whiskey, and there you can choose one of 3 tiers and you can get exclusive information before everybody else, which includes the book titles and book covers of all of my upcoming works. So that's a little update for Laura J. Live. All right, let's get into the episode with Sagan. Hello, Sagan, and welcome to Read It With Whiskey. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I got to say, I'm a big fan. I've been listening to your podcast for the last couple months, and I've listened to every single episode. So after I had gone through that, I'm like, I wonder if she wants to be on my podcast. This could be so exciting. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. So to start, I love to ask all of my guests, why did you become an author? What prompted you to become a writer?
I have always loved writing. When I was a little kid, like before I could actually spell, I would be sitting at this little desk in my room and I would just be scribbling on bits of paper. And my parents would ask me like, Sagan, what are you doing? I'd be like, I'm writing books. I'm writing stories. So I've just always written. And it's just always been a really important part of my own identity. And then it was one of those things that I always had this love of writing stories and telling stories and writing books. And it really got to this point where, from a business perspective, I was looking at things and I was like, well, I could never make money writing books, right? So that's just not going to happen. And then I ended up writing my very first book, which was nonfiction. It's called The Business of Writing and Editing. I wrote that because I'd been freelancing for quite a while, and other people kept on asking me, how are you able to do this? And so it was kind of a nice opportunity because I was like, oh, this gives me the chance to write a book on the subject, right? And then from there, I was like, well, I still can't make money writing novels. So I'm not going to do that. And it really wasn't until this point when I started to realize that I identify as polyamorous that it occurred to me that a big part of the reason why it had taken me so long to figure that out about myself was because I wasn't seeing polyamory represented in mainstream media, right? It's not in Hollywood. It's not in the books we read, anything like that. So I realized that this was an amazing opportunity for me to write the books that I wish that I had seen. And so that's how I started writing novels.
I love that. It's so interesting. And you're completely right. I had never even heard of polyamory until I found you. And so for our listeners, can you go ahead and tell them what polyamory is?
Yeah, so polyamory is basically the concept of having multiple romantic relationships with everyone understanding it, like everyone's consenting to it, and they're all happening simultaneously, right? So in our society, we tend to be kind of serial monogamists, where we date someone for a while and then we realize, like, oh, I want to date someone else, or this isn't working, or whatever it happens to be, and we jump around. And so polyamory is the idea that we can have multiple loving romantic relationships at the same time, and yeah, everyone consents to it. Everyone knows what's going on, so it's not like this backdoor type of thing. It's not cheating or anything like that.
Right, exactly. And we'll hit more on that when we talk about your book series, Polyamorous Passions. But first of all, you kind of touched on it, but what else do you do besides writing?
Yeah, so I started my business as a freelance writer many years ago, like a decade ago.
Mhm.
And over the years, I've really transitioned with my business. As I mentioned, a lot of other freelancers were asking me, how do I even start out doing this? How do I get clients? All of that kind of thing. So I wrote The Business of Writing and Editing the book. And then people really loved that book, but they had more questions. So I
Always.
began, right? There's always more.
For sure.
So I began creating online courses for freelancers to really teach people in a very in-depth way. So that was back in 2016. And then since then, I've pivoted a little bit more. And now the main thing that I do is that I'm a productivity strategist. So I teach solopreneurs and multi-passionate creatives how to save 10 plus hours every week, how to save energy, right? Really
Mhm.
maximize their productivity.
And I think anyone who's writing a book needs to know how to do that. Everybody, especially if you're working a full-time job on top of writing as a hobby, having that productivity coach there to help you is so beneficial. And so this has been your life for quite a few years, working for yourself, being an entrepreneur. So how long has it taken you? How many books do you have in total?
I have 7 novels.
Mhm.
7 books in the Polyamorous Passion series have been written and published. And I have 3 business books as well that I've written and published.
Okay. And were all these written and published within the last few years, last 10 years?
Yeah, so I wrote The Business of Writing and Editing. I published that in early 2016. I started writing the Polyamorous Passion series in 2018. So I wrote those
Wow.
7 books since then.
That's
And
so
that's
fast.
also the business books were in that, the other 2 were in that time as well.
That is really intense. I'm impressed. And so you are also self-publishing all 10 of these books, correct? So what was it that made you decide, okay, self-publishing is my route versus the traditional?
I'm very impatient.
Me too.
I loved the idea of being traditionally published, but the concept of waiting, and needing to pitch and then wait the months, right, to just
Yeah.
to just to find an agent and then to find a publishing, all of those different aspects. And at the time, especially when it came to realizing I identify as polyamorous, I was like, I need to get this message out there immediately.
Yes.
So that's how I ended up actually writing and publishing the first book in the series within the space of 6 weeks of
Wow.
coming up with the idea for the series and actually the actual publishing date when it went live. That all happened in a 6 week period. So it was
Yes.
really, really fast turnaround.
Wow, this passion just wanted to get out of you. Like, get me to the world. Let's talk to everybody about it. I love that. So 10 books out, and you're working on a few different projects. So what are the projects you're working on now?
My book projects.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So the main book project that I'm working on right now is called Small Town Stilettos, A Modern Marriage of Convenience. So that is another romantic comedy. All of my novels so far are romantic comedies, polyamorous romantic comedies. And Small Town Stilettos is this whole story of a fashion designer, a big city fashion designer, who goes to a small town when her aunt dies and she has to take care of the estate. And she discovers that the only way to access her inheritance is by marrying her childhood sweetheart.
Whew.
Yeah. So that's a whole thing that happens. Um, and one of the really cool parts about that story is that it is kind of a spin-off book from the Polyamorous Passion series. So the three main characters who are featured in the Polyamorous Passion series, they make a brief appearance in one of the chapters of Small Town Stilettos. So it's kind of, that's it's kind of all connected. I
Right.
really like the idea of having this entire world of books. So there will definitely be multiple spin-off books in the future beyond the core Polyamorous Passion series.
Right. They all live in the same universe, basically, this world you've
Yes.
created. Oh, I love it.
Yes.
That's so exciting. And so those and the Small Town Stilettos, you said is that a full length novel? Because the Polyamorous Passions, those are novellas. So do you
Yes.
want to kind of explain to our listeners the difference between a novella and a novel and kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, so a novella is just a shorter novel. So it's, kind of like the length of, I think like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or
Hmm.
the Great Gatsby, books like that are more novella style. And that was part of the reason why I chose to write novellas for the Polyamorous Passion series was again sort of this action sort of component, right? Where I had the idea for the books and I felt as though if I wrote my first book as a full-length novel, it would take too long and I might get overwhelmed along the way. And
Right.
so that's why it was planned out originally as a 9-book series, right? So that I could really get the books out a little, at least in the beginning, I could get them out a little bit faster and sort of like really play around with that. So Small Town Stilettos is going to be a full-length novel. And it's being kind of fun to experiment with things and explore the different lengths of how we can create stories and how we can tell stories over a shorter period of time or a longer period of time.
And
Yeah.
it's
So that
challenging.
was kind of the reason why I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's challenging because I know I've always wanted to do full length novels. So that's what my upcoming series is. And when I was reading your book, we're going to talk about it. It was kind of refreshing to read a smaller length book. And so I think it's really good for the reader too. They just want to get like a bite-sized piece. They don't want to have to sit and read a novel and have it take days. Some people want it more quickly. And there's definitely a niche there where a lot of people are gonna want that type of book.
Yes.
So for your writing process, we're going to dive into what the polyamorous passions are actually about. But with that writing process in making these smaller novellas, it's a 9-book series. So did you actually outline all 9 books in the beginning, or did you go one by one?
Yeah, I actually outlined the entire series right from the start.
So cool.
Yeah, and it was really like the entire concept with it being a 9-book series is, the fact that it really follows the three best friends over the course of their journey of discovering polyamory, each in their own ways. And so then that way, each of the 9 books could be broken down into 3 trilogies, right? So we can
Mhm.
follow along the story of all 3 main characters in chronological order across the 9-book series, but each of them get sort of their own spotlight
Mhm.
in books 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, right? So it's been kind of fun to do it that way. And it's definitely, I did map out the outlines right from the start. But as I've gone through, there's definitely been, as I've written a book and then I start on the next one, I've definitely tweaked, the direction that things take. The core journey and the core concept of polyamorous passions is staying the same since my initial inception, but the books themselves tend to they've definitely tweaked over the years over the years as I write each book.
Definitely. And sometimes the characters they want to run a different direction. And you're like, no, come
Yes.
back. And they're like, no, go with it. It's going to be a good thing.
It's so true.
Oh, I know. I love it. Okay. So this 9-part series, they follow the 3 friends, Emma, Helen, and Scarlett. And I read book 7, Her Bad Idea. And something that I was really excited about was the fact that this was book 7, but I could read it on its own. I didn't need to read the first 6 books. So tell us a little bit more about each of those characters, 1 through 3, books 1 through 3, 4 through 6, and then 7 through 9. And yeah, just take it away. Let us know more about the books.
Yeah. So I really love the idea of writing books that you could read as standalones.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my readers who have sort of jumped in at a particular point in the series and then they read the backstory, they really love that you can get a full understanding of the characters from that one book. You don't feel as though you're like, where's the backstory, right? Like anything like that. But you get a really comprehensive overview of it by going back and reading the rest of the series, right? So it's kind of fun that you can sort of pick and choose where you want to start. And then if you really want the full experience, then reading the entire series is, of course, a great way to go. But the books start out with Emma as the main character in books 1 to 3. And, she really starts out by, she's dating one guy who's really wonderful, and then she happens to meet someone else and she falls for him. And then she realizes, oh no, what have I done? Right? She kind of falls into this experience. And so that book, A Choice Between Two, is her whole process of trying to figure out how she's going to navigate this and what she should do. And so she realizes by the end of the book that, why do I need to choose between these 2 great people? So she kind of, goes on this journey, realizes that this is what she wants, that she wants to be polyamorous. And she manages to get that going with both of these 2 men that she's dating.
It was so exciting.
And then, over time, right? And like in book 2, she experiences a series of, she makes a lot of mistakes with dating. She experiences the whole thing of coming out as polyamorous to other people. And then in book 3, there's kind of experiencing some heartbreak and that kind of thing. So we really see this whole journey of her own self-discovery and her relationships with people.
Right.
And then in books 4 to 6, that's Helen's journey. So her situation is a little bit different because she's not dating people. She's been with her fiance for years, right? So she has this whole other perspective. And then she actually ends up falling for her wedding photographer. So that's scandalous.
Oh, I know.
So that's a whole period of her and her fiance figuring things out through books 4 to 6. And then books 7 to 9 are a little bit different because with Scarlett's experience, she has her two best friends, Emma and Helen, who have already started out this whole polyamory type of thing. And for her, it's more about she's just really coming at it from a different perspective where, she loves being single. She really enjoys it. And then she realizes that she's falling for a couple of different people, and she's connecting with someone who already is non-monogamous himself, right? So there's definitely in books 8 to 9, there's going to be some tension there.
Oh, I'm so excited. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm definitely, you've roped me in. Now I've read the one book, I'm going to have to circle back and read the beginning because I like that I get to see Scarlett's point of view, but I know that Emma and Helen have these huge stories that I can dive back into and get to know them better because they're definitely well-rounded in book 7, but you're just going to learn way more about them in the first 6 books. So I'm excited to go and do that. And I'm really excited to see where this book is heading. So in book 7, Her Bad Idea, tell us about that storyline, about Scarlett, her kind of dilemma that she's going through, and her love interest.
Yeah, so Scarlett is a burlesque dancer. So she has her own business. And right from the start, she's experiencing this major problem with her business in that she's really close to bankruptcy. Her business is, it seems very successful from the outside, but financially, it's just a bit of a disaster. So she's really trying to figure out, how can I how can I actually make money doing this? Am I going to be forced to start a different, to, join the corporate life, that kind of thing. And a dance competition opportunity comes up for her to make a lot of money and really get that financial health back in order. The only problem is that she needs a dance partner, and she's kind of put in this position where she has no time to choose a partner. She's forced into being dance partners with Pete Fraser, who, she's already had a run-in with. So they keep butting heads, and she does not like him. He does not like her, but they're in this mess together. So the entire book is this whole experience of them needing to work together. They're forced into being in this dance competition. And simultaneously, she's also going through this whole thing, which where she has this unrequited crush on someone else, Wes. And she's, we've actually heard about him in, I think, all of the previous books in the series.
It's a buildup. It's coming, you guys. Watch out. Oh, book 8. I'm so excited. That I love this storyline, and I love the trope that you brought in with the fake relationship. And do you do different tropes for all the different books, or how did you decide on that trope, I guess?
Right from the start with writing these books, I was really, I had the concept of the story that I wanted to tell, and I didn't think about tropes at all. And so it wasn't actually until this book that I was like, I should start actually thinking about tropes, because whenever I'm choosing a book to read, I always, choose based on tropes. And so I really chose some of my favorite tropes. And that's how I sort of grew Her Bad Idea into what it is, with enemies to lovers, slow burn, fake relationship, forced proximity.
I love it. And I really like that you share a lot of this on your podcast. So if anybody wants to learn more about all the background stuff, Indie Author Weekly podcast, go and listen to it. I loved the little sneak peeks that you had in the podcast. Okay, so obviously this is inspired by polyamory, and so your own experience. Do you want to talk to us about how is your life directly put into this book? Is there anything within the storyline that is from your personal life?
I mean, there's definitely different elements of all the characters that are, there's some aspect of pretty much every single character that comes from who I am, right? There's little bits of me in all of the different characters. But some of the dating experiences that happen in previous books in the series are based on my own experiences. But really overall, a lot of what happens to these characters it's not really from my own sorts of experiences, because so much of my experience with polyamory has been very low key, right? No drama or anything like that. And it's just been very fun and lighthearted, which is a really big part of these books, right? So in that way, that was a really important aspect for me when I was writing these stories. I wanted to feature polyamory in the way that I have experienced it, which is that it can be like fairly low drama. It can be really fun and enjoyable and light and all of that kind of thing. The friendships as well, because a big part of the stories, it's about polyamory. It's about those romantic relationships. It's also about platonic love, right? It's about these really positive, supportive female friendships. That's a really important underlying message, which is a really big part of my own life. That's based on, my own great relationships with friends. And it's also about this whole journey of self-discovery. That's another extremely important thread throughout the stories. So that's a really, really key part that I wanted to include.
Yes, and it translates. It's so great because people think polyamory, and if they don't know anything about it, they're like, what is this going to be? Is it going to be always hot and steamy, or is there going to be a lot of drama? But it's a romantic comedy. It's funny. I was spitting out my drink as I was reading it, because there is the comedic relief, and it was just great. I loved it. And another part that I really liked within this specific book was the body positivity that you brought into the character of Scarlett. So if you want to touch on that a little bit, why is that such a dynamic part of her character?
Yeah. Having that body positivity, sex positivity, all of that,
Hmm.
there's so many issues with that type of thing in our society. And I really wanted these books to have that kind of expression to help readers not only think about polyamory as a viable option for themselves or to help normalize polyamory in our society, but also to help readers um, get more comfortable in their own skin, right? This is a journey that I think all of us are taking at some point or another, or it's an ongoing journey that all of us are continuing to experience. So being able to include that as a really important part of who Scarlett is, and the way that she dresses and that kind of
Hmm.
thing, like she's totally confident with her own sexuality and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
which I really love. Yeah, that's just, and that's like a big part of who I am really as well. I love wearing faux leather, just like Scarlett.
Yep.
I have shown up to events. I'm a hobbyist burlesque dancer myself,
Hmm.
and I've shown up to events where I was watching other people perform burlesque, and I'd be there, and other people there would be like, "Oh, are you performing?" And I'm like, "No, this is my outfit. Like
This is
this
just
is
me.
just me at the bar." Like,
I love that. Yeah, I just love that she is so open about herself, and she's just a total badass. She's like, I'm going to wear what I want to wear, and I'm this hot burlesque dancer, and this is what I love. So why should I be ashamed of it? And I think a lot of people need to hear that message. So it was really exciting to read. And then also because I can't dance at all, I could kind of like escape into her life and pretend that I can. So that was exciting too. Okay, so we're not going to go into too many of the spoilers of the book, but I do want to say that the dynamic between Scarlett and Pete as they are progressing in their relationship is there's moments where I'm like, you guys just pull it together. Like, what's going on? And so, what was that like trying to write? Kind of the difficulty in like, okay, I think I have feelings, but maybe I don't. Like, I don't know what to do. How should I move forward? But then also tying in humor to all of that, is that difficult to do as a writer, or did it kind of come naturally for you? That's a loaded question. Sorry.
yes and no.
Okay.
It's a bit of both. Yeah. Definitely, as I'm going through the writing process of drafting stories, I often find that along the way, I'm writing the first, couple of drafts are really figuring out the character and the story, like the plot itself, right? And then after I get, the first couple of drafts done, then I tend to read through it and I'm like, okay, like there's not enough humor here. So like this scene could like there's some really great opportunities in this. So,
Mm-hmm.
I jot down notes to like explore how I can add some humor to this or add a comedic sort of flair to it. And that's also at the point where I really look at, okay, how is the tension going? Does it make sense
Mm-hmm.
that they haven't gotten together yet? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I absolutely adore slow burn, as you can
Oh
clearly
yeah.
tell from this book. And so really looking at how do I make sure that this does make sense, right? That was a
Mm-hmm.
really key part that happened, yeah, again, probably around that draft 3, draft 4 sort
Right.
of part of the writing process.
Okay.
But some parts of it too, just like they do come very naturally,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot of fun, right? And I really have found as well that when I started writing the books at the beginning of the series, I was holding back a bit more with writing humor and like having that sort of comedic lens.
Okay.
I was trying not to incorporate as much, I think, because when I first started writing these books, I didn't realize that they were romantic comedies.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been really wonderful because as I've written each book, they do get funnier, right? Because I'm
Okay.
allowing myself to be more open about the comedic aspects of the story, and allowing that to flow through me is actually like it feels easier almost to write the comedic aspects because I'm not like holding myself back. I'm not worrying about, will readers find this funny? Maybe I just think this is funny. Now I'm just like, no, if I think it's funny, I'm putting it in.
And there's a specific scene that I remember you talking about in your podcast about Scarlett's parents and their jobs and how you had to go back and figure out if the comedy would be caught by the reader. It was good. It was there. All right.
I'm glad to hear that.
So something I love to ask my guests is, who is your favorite character to actually write within these books? Your books are novellas, so they're kind of shorter, so there's not too much room to have too many characters because you can't fully evolve them. But throughout the entire 9-book series, what character do you think is your favorite to write?
My favorite character to write is whoever I am writing in that moment.
Okay. And why do you say that?
I think that there's just a lot of joy in the experience of getting to know those characters. And when we are in that process of writing them, they show who they are to ourselves, right? As the writer, they're revealing themselves throughout the writing process, which is just, it's extremely beautiful and it's a really lovely experience. And it's also really interesting because as you're writing each character, I mean, definitely the favorite character is always the one that I'm writing. And at the same time, I love all of my characters in different ways. Just like with polyamory in real life, right? I don't feel the same way about each character. I love them all equally, but in different sorts of ways.
Right.
And I mean, Helen is a really good example here where she is so different from who I am. She's so different from my personality that it was really, really interesting to delve into her character and really like play with who she is. So that was a really kind of interesting experience for books 4 to 6.
Yeah, that's exciting when you're writing something that it's just not the norm. It's a different type of person, a different type of character, just the different personalities, because not every character can be the same, right? You have to have different personalities. And so I like that. I like that you enjoy the process of everything, or of all the characters. That's interesting. Good to think about. All right. So this wouldn't be Read It with Whiskey without talking about whiskey. So what is your favorite whiskey to drink?
Probably Glenlivet. I really like that. The Balvenie is great as well. And whenever I'm making hot toddies, it always needs to be done with Jameson.
There you go. I love it.
It's a classic that everyone can enjoy. Whenever you're drinking whiskey, if you're introducing someone new to whiskey, Jameson is a good go-to.
Definitely good go-to. All right, Sagan. So tell our listeners, where can they find you? Where can they find your books and learn more about you?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time on Instagram and Twitter. My handle is @SaganLives. You can learn more about all of my books and buy them on any major ebook store, or you can visit saganmorrow.com/books. And you can always learn more about the inside scoop on the writing journey and that kind of thing on my podcast, Indie Author Weekly.
All right, Sagan. Well, thank you so much for being on Read It with Whiskey. I had so much fun with you.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Is Sagan not the most amazing person ever? Oh my goodness. I had such a great time talking with her, talking about all of her books and her work. And I'm just so honored to have her on the show because, like I said at the beginning of this episode, I've been listening to Indie Author Weekly. I've listened to all of her episodes. I only just found her in the beginning of 2021. And so I binge listened a lot of episodes all at once. And she has some great advice for indie authors, to new authors. And it's just been really beneficial for me as a writer, as a reader. And so I was just very honored to have her on the show. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation that we had, and definitely dive into those books because I'm going to be diving into more of them. Having only read one so far, I've got a lot more. There's 9 in the series, so watch out. All right, and next week, we will be talking with Trinity Lem. So Trinity Lem is a college student in Michigan, and she has written Forever Burn, and her second book, Forever Frozen, is coming out in mid-April. So we'll definitely fill you in on more details there, but we will be talking with her next week. Her books are young adult contemporary romance, so definitely something to think about when you're getting ready for her episode. Definitely I keep saying definitely, you guys. Sorry. It was really fun talking with her. I've already recorded the episode, and I'm really excited for you guys to listen in and go and buy her books. So that will be next week on April 6th with Trinity Lum. Until then, have a great one.